tell you what.
We are live and recording. I feel like an old man this week. I'm back in the gym for the first time in forever, and I feel like crickety and ugh.
I'm excited. This week's going to be fun. We have a holiday out here called Pioneer Day. It's when Utah was settled by the Mormons out here, so it's a big deal. And it's like 4th of July #2.
You know, I got to give a shout out to Utah for like the Mormons settling and not just like people coming in and saying, get off of our land.
I'm sure there is a little bit of that too.
Probably, but it sounds better than Christopher Columbus coming and like kicking down doors and shit.
For sure. But we, us non-Mormons celebrated as Pioneer Day. And then this year, apparently they're going to
Pioneer.
Apparently they're going to be announcing our Olympics this year.
Yeah, I heard that was a rumor.
So one of my clients, he does some stuff for the Olympic planning, and he's been telling me for months on end that it's like a sure thing. So I'm going to the event, but it coincides with Paris, and that's 3 a.m. Lucas. They're doing a big announcement party in the city, but 3 a.m.
Yeah, that's been circulating for a couple months now, and I know that because unrelated, but I don't know how you call it in English. It's called the Copa America, which is it's the North, Central, and South American soccer tournament that's been held in the United States this year, and there were talks about, like, during one of the games, there were talks about a potential next place for the Olympics, and someone had mentioned Utah, and that had been circulating, and I think that's going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, so 2034. Hopefully I'm still around these parts when that goes on, because the last one was exciting.
You'll be in Texas. But we'll go. We'll go.
All right. Well, let's stop beating around the bush. Welcome everyone. This is episode 103 of the Retic Lounge. We're doing another locality spotlight, which Lucas, we talked about how it's been a long time for the species spotlight, but it's been an even longer time for locality.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I think the last one that we did was with Chris McVicker doing Salayers, if I'm not mistaken, and we haven't had him on in probably 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Maybe 3. But there's only so many localities that we know of, at least.
Yeah, but one you heavily work with.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about Ternate, or Ternate, for the sake of this episode. I'm just going to flat out say it's pronounced Ternate, but I'm going to say Ternate because that's what I say, even though that's pretty ignorant and probably not very respectful of me. But I know that if I try and say Ternate throughout the course of this episode, I'm going to be going back and forth between the two pronunciations. And so I'm just going to call them Ternates. Okay.
That's what I'm going to go with as well.
Yeah, so before we even jump into that, if you guys haven't caught any of our locality talks, we basically break down different localities, and typically we've had guests on who either heavily work with them, are part of importing them, or they just have a passion for them, like Chris did with the Salayers. Whether you've poured your heart and soul into your reptile business or you've just begun your business journey, AE Foundry has you covered with next-level expertise in graphic design, motion graphics, videography, photography, and so much more. If you've been dying for a new logo for your reptile business, motion graphics for your current logo, a new website, or need assistance making your video podcast come to life, then listen carefully. AE Foundry's mission places storytelling at its core. AE Foundry believes that a distinctive story and background are the driving forces that set your brand apart. In today's market, consumers seek more than just products. They crave a connection built on trust with the brands they cherish. AE Foundry is committed to empowering small businesses and fostering authenticity that resonates with their consumers. Reach out to them and let them help you craft a visual narrative that helps establish a genuine and lasting connection with your audience. To contact AE Foundry, email them at aromero@aefoundry.com or on Instagram at AE Foundry. When it comes to housing your retics, trust me, you're going to want an enclosure that will be just as strong and durable as your reticulated python. The Heartland reptile enclosure is next level tough and will outlive you and your retic by several generations. Heartland reptile enclosures are designed and manufactured out of powder-coated aluminum to provide the highest quality and longevity available in the reptile enclosure. What makes them even better is they are lighter than your PVC and plastic enclosures out there and are extremely tough. Stop playing around with plastic enclosures for your large constrictors and step up your enclosure game with the Heartland reptile enclosure. To inquire about one of these enclosures, speak to Jordan himself at Heartland Reptiles on Instagram, Facebook, and on TikTok. Here on TRL, we preach about the importance of using hooks, feeding tongs, and other tools with your reticulated python all the time. Animal Equipment by Stoney not only has all the tools you need for any snake you keep, but they have the absolute best hooks on the market. What sets Animal Equipment by Stoney's hooks apart from the other guys is their polycarbonate hook ends that provide a warm feel that won't disturb or bother your retic, ensuring a positive interaction from the get-go. Since 2008, AE Stoney has been supplying zoos, herpetologists, and other animal professionals with their tools. It's time for you to step your hook game up and buy an AE Stoney hook. To learn more and purchase one of their amazing products, visit aestoney.com. But this time we did a similar, and we could drop the link down below. We did a similar episode called the Maluku Locality Talk, and that was covering Ternate, Halmahera, Tadori. It was basically familiarizing everyone with the Maluku region, Western Hemisphere of Indonesia. And now I want to we decided we were going to get into the nitty gritty with just Ternate because one, our Patreons asked for a Ternate locality talk, and two, because they seem to be growing in popularity, and there are just so many questions that people ask me about them in regards to their colors, shapes, sizes, all that kind of stuff. And so we figured let's just knock this one out and provide you guys some information on the Ternate locality of reticulated pythons.
Yeah, I mean, it's questions that I've even inundated you with over the years. Like it's a locality that I've very highly considered adding to my collection just because of their color and size.
Yeah, I think, and what I would really like us to highlight as well when we talk about color, size, we're going to jump in here in a bit and just talk about Ternate Island and what makes Ternate Island a little bit different than some of the eastern Indonesian islands where some of these animals are from, but also getting into the behavior differences. I've been lucky enough that I've worked with 6 different Ternates. I have 4 in my garage right now, and out of those 6, none of them overlapped in being related. So I got to see a lot of different phenotypic expressions, and I've got to work a lot hands-on with their behavior. Outside of Rodney, who obviously was the one who imported them, there's maybe a few other people that I've worked with more than I have, or maybe not more, but that I've kept them as long. But I've had Ternates now for close to 5 years. I think it's been 4.5 years. And outside of Kalatoa, I've owned more Ternates than Kalatoas, but outside of like longevity and length of time that I've owned them, it's the second longest locality that I've had in my possession.
Yeah.
Or second longest I've kept a locality in my possession, not the second longest locality.
Now, do you think that's a locality that's going to be a staple in your collection forever?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We've talked about historically of me, downsizing and working with different locality retics, and I think my end goal was to have a small locality, a medium locality, and a large locality when I was done producing every locality that I possibly could and just keeping one of each of those. And Ternate is definitely up there on that medium locality list. It's really hard to pick between Solaire, Ternate, and Halmahera. Like those three for those medium-ish localities. The Ternates are definitely going to be the more manageable size one.
Mm-hmm.
Solaire's kind of have my heart after this last clutch I produced. They were killer, and Halmaheras are just so dark. It's tough. So I will have them for the good foreseeable future, but I don't know if when it's all said and done, if it's going to be one that I keep.
All right. Well, do you want to jump into the geography of Ternate to start?
Yeah. So let's jump into like where Ternate Island is. So Nathan's going to pull up a map here. Cool. He's got it. If you zoom in a little, Nate, I'm going to actually maximize my screen so I can actually see what we're messing with. So if you look over to the bottom left, you have Sulawesi, right? And you have the Indonesian islands. You have North Sulawesi, you have South Sulawesi, and then Nathan, if you even want to click and go a little bit further south, we can talk about like this little skinny island over to the left is where like Jampea, Kalatoa, and all that stuff is. Right over there, right where your mouse is, all that good stuff. So that's the Bonneray Island change. You have Kalatoa Island that's right over there. So just to give you guys a reference, I know a lot of you that are listening, that is where the Superdorf Islands are. So let's go over to the Maluku region, which is where Ternate Island is. So again, extremely far away. I don't know if this is a scientific fact, but I can only imagine that the reticulated python probably has the largest range of any other python species in the world.
I thought that was already like,
yeah, I'm
proven.
pretty sure that's a fact. I don't have the source in my head to be able to state it. So again, don't quote me on that, but I'm 90% sure that is accurate. Retics cover a massive area. And so when we look at the Maluku region, this is what we're looking at. Ternate is part of the Malucan island chains, and if you guys see on this big map here, for those of you that are just listening on Spotify, by the way, or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, this might be a good one to check out on YouTube. You'll get to see pictures of Ternates, and we're using the map here. So you see the North Maluku there at the top, and then to the right you see another big body of land, and that's where you see Halmahera, right? Halmaheras are part of the other Maluku region, the Maluku Islands that are kept here in the United States. Out of all of the Maluku Islands here in the U.S., I'm pretty sure we have Ternate, Halmahera, Ambon, and I want to say Saram as well, but I'm not even trying to find those on the map right now because I was just preparing for Ternate. So, Nate, go ahead and zoom in on Ternate Island. Ternate Island is probably, or Ternate Island is probably, it's roughly about 30 square miles. So it's a decent island size. For those of you that are not aware, but if you go over to the Kalatoa area, to the Sulawesi area, it is very forest like, which it is the same here. Ternate Island has a pretty big population over to the east coast, but what makes these Maluku region islands really stand out from any of the other islands are the volcanoes that are on there. Ternate Island, actually, Nathan, I was in the process and I got distracted by a chat that I had. But a good buddy of mine, Jared Aker, he is a pilot. And really what's cool about him being a pilot is he flies over these areas very frequently. And he sent me a picture that
the Gama Lama volcano is apparently what it's called.
The Gama Lama.
Gama Lama.
My daughter pronounces lava, like llama. So she would actually nail that.
Yeah, I am just doing a quick Google search, and it looks like there's two that are listed: Mount Hiri and Gamalama.
Yeah, so I'm about to actually send you a picture of.
Oh, there's a picture of it from the water as well, the main volcano that formed the island.
Yeah, and again, if I can't get this picture up right now, I'll try to get it in post production. But ultimately, he was flying over, and you can see activity coming out of the volcanoes that he snapped a picture of.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and this was probably only about 6 months ago. So volcanic activity happens pretty frequently in Halmahera and on Ternate Island. And if you guys look at what you're looking at right there, you're going to see part of what makes Ternate Island is the darker rock formations that are found around the volcano. And then around the volcano area, there's forest and there's vegetation, and there's areas that potentially retics could inhabit. Now, Nathan, we know how evolution works, and we know how animals adapt to survive over the years. But have you noticed that ternates and halmaheras are typically can be much darker than some of the the Sulawesi or the Javans or the Kalatoas? Like they have a more black undertone.
They definitely do, but they still have a pretty high amount of color saturation.
Yeah, a good pop of color saturation. But I'm almost wondering if their base dark color is a result of maybe some of the volcanic activity that exists, and just the darker rock formations that could possibly be taking place there versus other areas of Indonesia that don't have volcanoes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so man, I really would love to go travel over there. That would be absolutely beautiful. So I think it's cool that Nathan's pulling up some of the pictures of the landscape there, because I think one thing that we do as retic owners and keepers is we don't do this kind of stuff as often as I feel like we should, especially for some of those newer keepers and breeders that are wanting to do more naturalistic.
Yeah, I mean, look at this picture right here. If that doesn't inspire you for a naturalistic enclosure for a retic,
I mean, I feel like, we don't have a plug with them, but whatever. I feel like Universal Rocks literally has that setup, and then you can literally just get algae or you can paint or do whatever you got to do. But yeah, that looks incredible.
Yeah.
So yeah, about 30 square miles. And just for reference, and again, I don't think that island is always a direct, there's definitely correlation with size of island and size of snake on the island when it comes to retics. But if we look at Kalatoa Island size, and I just Googled that real quick, let's see. So, well, I guess let's use Solaire with another medium size locality. Solaire is about 523 square miles, where Ternate Island is roughly 496 square miles. So a little bit smaller than the island of Solaire. So yeah, I mean, I if you guys didn't know, there's this very big conversation that there is to be told about the size of ternates. And I'm going to give you guys a general consensus on size, because I'm never that person who will put a stamp on size range. But Nathan, I'm curious from your perspective, what is it that you've heard? And again, we talk a lot about localities, but what is your understanding on the size of the ternate locality?
General, just like super general, from what I've heard, is about 7 to 12, 8 to 12 feet, somewhere around there, depending male to female. And then I hear just a heavier body composition. So those are like 8 to 12 doesn't necessarily scare me away, but then adding in the heavier body composition, that's what's maybe made me a little bit more hesitant on adding ternate into my collection.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I feel like they are that's a good size range. I would probably even venture to go up 1 foot to 13. And I mean, and again, I like playing things safe with locality. Everyone wants a small snake right now. And so, if I'm going to cover my ass CYA when I'm talking to people, I'm always going to like go up a foot. Right. But generally speaking, right now, I think that there are 13 or 14, maybe even 15 pure Ternate clutches that have been produced in the US. And out of those 15, I want to say 13 guaranteed have not crossed, have not like been line or inbred. So they're all distinct and unrelated clutches. So that's the really cool thing about Ternate Island, is that for any of you that are worried about bottlenecking, and if you guys haven't listened to our episode about that we had with Riley I still would encourage you to listen to that. But Ternate is probably the safest locality in the United States when it comes to you could get a huge group of Ternates and not a single one of them be related in the US. So I find that cool. But back to their size, I would venture to say, yeah, from that 8 to 13 foot range, most of them being in the middle of that. And just to give you guys an example, the animal that was on the thumbnail is my female Wanda. She's got a boyfriend, Vision, that I'm going to be pairing with them this year. And she is 5.5 years old. And she is about 8.5 feet with heavy feeding. And I'll explain a little bit more about their feeding and stuff when we get into their basic behaviors and all that. I have another female, same age, a little bit older. Her name is Tiny. And that's because she's about 8 feet. But she's also much thinner. Her body composition is super thin compared to the other female that I have. Now, what's interesting, Nathan, is my male Vision is 4 years old, but he's bigger than both of my females.
But I mean, full size, like once they reach their full potential, the males are still sexually dimorphic.
Yeah.
Like smaller than the females generally. I mean, I've seen that up at Wildfire too. He had, again, I have to be reminded by you every time, that locality that I was
Malaysia Sulawesi cross that he has, that male that's like 17 feet.
Yep, and the female's smaller, but I mean,
yeah, they are dimorphic, and growth rates will be different. Plus, I will say this about my male: before I moved into the garage and I was on my gradient, he was a pusher. I could never make him happy. And so obviously one of the ways I got him to stop pushing was giving him a little bit more food. So he had a good head start when I got them into my possession. So yeah. And I mean, what's really fascinating about them is they lay small clutches, but massive eggs. We're talking about eggs in the 250 to 270 gram range, versus a Kalatoa egg that's in the 85 to 92 gram range. Some are smaller, right? So we're talking about triple the size of an egg coming out of an animal. For some cases, many cases are similar in size that first year that they're breeding, but they only lay clutches of like 8 to 12. I think the largest clutch that Rodney hatched, that Rodney produced was, 14 eggs. Okay. From which is tiny.
Yeah, I remember hearing in the past that they had some big eggs, but
they got big eggs, and big eggs mean big babies. But what I think that people get scared of is this idea that like, oh, well, if it's a big egg and big baby, then bigger snake. But again, growth rate is everything. And if we are being honest, these are a different species of snake when we're talking about the Jampianus subspecies. They're just different.
They come from a totally different part of the world, and in my opinion, I mean, it's verifiably far away. I mean, as we zoom out to go from here,
holy
all
shit.
The way south of Indonesia to this small island. I mean, geographically, a totally different part of the world.
I guarantee you, the distance of miles in between that is greater than the U.S. to Europe.
Ooh, that's a great. That's a great question. Nah, I don't think so.
You're not even close to looking.
Here, I'm panning out, Lucas. No, it is not even close to that comparison.
Oh no, it's not. You're right. Okay. Yeah, dude, I
It
forget
looked a
how
lot
heavily
it looked a lot bigger when we're all zoomed in.
I forget
but
how
I wasn't
heavily
gonna give you that.
dense that area is. But yeah, so nonetheless, still far away. Especially if you're trying to get there on plane or boat in that area of the world, probably not a fun trip. Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna go as far to say, like with green tree pythons, that like a biak is not the same snake as an aru, then a Maluku region retic is not the same species as a subspecies Jampianus reticulated python. There's just no way. There's way more difference in that than I think that there is in the green tree pythons.
Here's my reasoning, Lucas. And it's as simple as this. This is where the biggest snakes in the world come from.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the smallest snakes in the world come from. It's a smaller distance from there to there than even there to Ternate.
Yeah, so if there's going to be a subspecies broken down to there, that's a good point. But aside from distance, right? Which, Nathan, that's a great freaking point. Like they created 3 subspecies using mainland reticulated pythons, salayers, and jampeas, or the Jampianus subspecies, which now includes, the Kalatoa, the Madu, all those things. And all of those, the salayer, the Jampea, and the Kalatoa are so close together, but yet there's 2 subspecies that are right there. So the Maluku region animals, so ternates in particular, they have these very big jaw-like muscles that you see in the back of them. They don't have that long, elongated face that the Jampianus complex does, but it also doesn't have that bulldog like flat nose that the Saputrii with salayers have. And so when it comes to like their behaviors, I think that there's a lot to be said about them. They just tick differently. Nathan, if you can pull up a picture of mine on either an Instagram, or you can go to the Retic. Actually, let's teach our listeners how to do some history digging.
All right. Well, you go to the Retic Nation and then you type what you're looking for. So
Exactly.
in this case,
we also want to thank VivTech Products for being an affiliate sponsor of the Retic Lounge. Stop by VivTech Products for the best UV spectrum lighting on the market that will enhance and improve your snake's overall well-being and health. Visit vivtechproducts.com and use the code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Again, visit vivtechproducts.com and use our affiliate code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off.
Looking for the perfect accessories for your hatchlings or juvenile retics? Look no further than Heli Guy Serpents. Our sponsor, Chris Sexton, is coming in hot with an amazing 3D printer, creating top-notch perches and other caging accessories for your beloved pets. Enrich your retics environment with their high-quality products. Use our promo code TRL10 for a 10% discount on your purchase. Visit them today at heliguyserpents.com and start giving your pets the best. Heli Guy Serpents, the premier source for 3D printed caging accessories. Again, that's www.heliguyserpents.com and use our promo code TRL10 for 10% off all of your 3D printed accessories today.
We're talking about ternates tonight. We want to show some examples, not just from Lucas's collection, because we don't want to be biased. There's going to be a lot of Lucas and Rodney, as you're about to see. But in this example, when we first start out, we get a wild caught. There's some of those really dark blacks that you were talking about. Even the rosettes are darker than most wild caught retics that you see.
Mm-hmm.
Through the saddles, darker, but then you still get some nice bright oranges right through the saddles too.
Yeah, like they're full of color, but now you see what I mean by like their base undertone color is very dark. Yeah, it's super dark. Man, that's a good looking ternate.
Straight from the island. It's the best place to get them.
Exactly. Yeah, so again, as we're doing this, guys, I think it's important. That's when I got my very first pair. So the female on the top, Wanda, and the male's got probably one of the craziest patterns that I've ever seen on a ternate, and you can see kind of where it is on that tail end. But
Back through here.
yeah, shout out to my dogs for scratching the paint on the door and not using the bell. But man, I forgot how little they were when I got them. That's really cool to go back and see that. Super cool thing that you'll find interesting on my female is that she is that's Joshua Jeter's big girl.
Yeah, so there we go. I mean, that's definitely on the top end of, what I'm willing to handle.
His was probably the biggest at the age that I have seen. Now, one thing that I also will say is that just like any other island, when you feed well, your snake is going to grow faster. And it'll grow larger if you feed it enough calories. And if you guys don't believe me, I can show you pictures of 11-foot Calatoas. It's possible. You could do it with any island. Now, one thing that I also will say to not be biased towards trying to preach this idea that ternates are these small animals, because they're not small. They are very small relatively compared to
in terms of
Sulas.
retics,
Right.
I would say they're small, but that
It's still
you need to qualify how small that is.
Right. Yeah, but one thing that I will say is that ternates are, oh man, I forgot where I was going with that. Is that they're small, but again, they got that beef, they got that muscle mass, they have weight to them that is different than the Jampianus subspecies that are generally very, very, very lean. But yeah, Joshua, that animal was, believe it or not, I'm pretty sure at the time that animal was only 4 years old. That he took that picture.
Easily 10, 11 feet there.
Yeah. Now, and my animals, my ternate females, one interesting thing. Yeah, that's the male. He's still probably my favorite ternate.
Okay. Don't lose track.
Sorry. He's gorgeous. I'm biased, whatever, but he's awesome. So when it comes to feeding these ternates, one thing that I will say that I was very much not on board with, but obviously, when I have questions about ternates and behaviors, I got to go to Rodney. Rodney's the guy that's been producing all of them, and he's worked with them longer than anybody in the country or in captivity in general. I would even say probably in the world. And so when it comes to feeding them, I kept saying, I was like, hey, these animals aren't growing and they are constantly hungry. And he told me, listen, you have to feed them big meals. And I was like, what do you mean big? I'm feeding them big. He's like, what are you feeding them? And at the time I was like, they're getting 1.5 pound pigs. He's like, double it. I was like, shut up. I'm not doubling it. And he's like, no, double it. And sure enough, I fed them a 3 pound pig, and their crazy food response chilled out. I started seeing some growth on them. Now, I thought my snake was going to regurgitate, but then that's when I was very young at keeping retics and realized that they could take pretty damn big meals. So one thing, a lot of people will ask me this. They're like, hey, I have a ternate, and they'll show me a picture, and it's this, or even a Halmahera, and it's like a 3-year-old animal, and it's still only 6 feet long. And I'm like, the animal's not going to grow unless you give it the meals that it needs to grow. For some reason, it seems like their growth really is stimulated with large meals. And that's what I do with my ternates. Outside of breeding season, they get a meal every 3 to 4 weeks, and every meal that they get, they look like they got a football inside of them. And they're happy because behaviorally, one thing that I really want to capitalize on is I've never had another subspecies of reticulated python do what my Maluku regions do. And this is the same for Halmaheras and for ternates. You can take them out of the enclosure, turn off that food response. I've said this a million times probably already on this podcast, but You could turn off that food response. And then when you turn off that food response, you can take them out like any normal retic. Well, if they're hungry and they're not getting the calories that they need to grow, what ends up happening is you're having this beautiful play date with your beautiful ternate, and all of a sudden your hand is purple and they're wrapping and constricting you, and they have their face kind of dug into like your hand, and it's a food response that happens. Or another of my favorite is you got to put them back in the enclosure, and as they're on your arm slithering into the enclosure, they all of a sudden wrap your arm and they turn around and they cock right at your face, ready to come at you. And that behavior has been curbed for all of my Maluku areas by giving them, I see that smirk. All of the Maluku regions,
just someone cut that up for me, please.
just cocked looking right at your face. Sorry. I had to repeat it. But they will, you gotta feed them. And again, I feed them, and they're not these massive, huge animals. So I'm curious, that snake right there.
Yeah, that's a ternate. That
Rodney
produced.
Is that Tim's?
That's Tim's, but that was a Rodney produced ternate.
Speaking of Rodney produced, I'm pretty sure there are 3 people in the U.S. that have produced pure ternates. Well, I guess 4 if you count my freaking Partho. And that's stretching it. Maybe only 3 with my Partho included. Rodney, again, I think has produced 14 or 15 clutches of pure ternates, whereas I've done one Partho baby that survived. Someone who I'm not even going to share their name on here, I think recently produced a pure ternate clutch. And then I want to say one other person has that. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know that's not helpful information, but just going to tell you and show that not a lot of people have produced them here in the US. They're relatively newer in terms of like popularity, would you say?
I would, yeah. I mean, I didn't end up hearing about them until I was 4 or 5 years into Retics.
Right. Yeah, same. I heard about them first in 2019 and I pulled the trigger in 2020. And I want to say that they were first imported in 2012. Yeah, 2012 at the very latest, the very earliest of 2013. So I mean, they've been in the country for 12 years, and you think like 12 years, that's a pretty long time, but it's not really. When you think about how long some of the Superdorf islands, and when we started bringing in some, some of the other wild-caught retics back in the 90s and early 2000s, they've been here for half as long. That was Joy. Good buddy of mine, Jesse Serrano, has her now. He bought her from me. This was a red phase. Again, this was sadly part of my like moving out. Is I love red phase. Oh, I guess I can get into the phases too, but I love red phase ternates. And the reason why I moved her out was because I was just kind of moving out some of the retics and just freeing up some room and some time and feeding bills. And I was already working with Solaire, right? That is super red and orange. So I figured why try to work on a different line of ternates with the red phase when I have a Solaire? And so I just wanted to focus on the ternates that I really, really loved more, which was the really dark stuff.
Okay. You want to talk about the color differences between the phases?
Yeah, so you generally have, I guess what's been defined as 3 different color spectrums that these animals come in. Like that one right there, stop right there. So that's what we would consider a green phase. So there's 3, there's the normal, there's the red phase, and there's the green phase. A green phase kind of just has like this hue that comes out under it. It's almost kind of like the greenish that some people kind of identify with like anery. That's not like really green, but it's got like that iridescent green that comes through. Then you have the red phase of the one I just showed you. And then you have your normal phase, which is kind of like my female Wanda, or that would kind of be that would basically be a normal. And again, that yellow can pop through on just about any one of those phases, even if you looked at Joy on that red phase. But let me get a better example of a normal phase. That one right there. No, the one right above it. That's on a pile of eggs. Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, that little female right there that laid that
in
egg.
a Heartland Reptiles enclosure.
Oh, that's my picture. I thought that was yeah. I was gonna say
I haven't seen a Ternate clutch in Heartland Reptiles enclosure anywhere else, so yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah, so yeah, that was the Partho clutch that she decided to lay. You want to know what was crazy about this clutch and crazy about that female? That's Wanda. Is that so something that I've never seen before? When she built follicles, it looked what like you would think it like. She just was like skinny, normal. I'm trying to do shapes again. Skinny, normal, and then she blew up. It almost looked like an ovulation. But she was actually building. It was the first time that I've ever witnessed on any of my other females that I've had go through the motions that the lower third just blew up with the follicles. I then went to pair her. She was not receptive, and when she was just peeing and wiping things all over the place. So I took her out, even though she clearly had follicles in her. And never saw a lock. It was only like a 3-hour introduction. I was in the garage basically the whole time. Took him out, and 5 days before she laid that clutch, she was still on food. She ate 5 days before she laid that clutch. I had no clue. I was out in Florida, and she laid that clutch, and a buddy of mine, Casey, had to come from New Braunfels and help Sean pull that clutch. And that's where my one dumb, cute little Partho came from. I see your comment there.
Huh?
I see your comment there.
Oh yeah, the Partho King. But any distinguishable differences between the red phase, the green phase?
Yeah, so I mean, when you're looking at a normal phase ternate, I think you see the darker undertones. But as far as like behaviors and things like that, no, it's just a color difference between the three of them. Price, they're all priced the same. As a matter of fact, there's really just only one line that is now being established. I think Rodney termed it the Apocalypto line. I don't know. Yeah, that's her, Wanda. That's your standard, just really shiny iridescent. What's really cool about her, she's got like the donut patterns in the top, and then she goes into a stripe pattern, and then her tail's like a normal ternate pattern. I think on Rodney's Instagram, and I don't know, I think they're phenomenal examples of a ternate, but he selectively bred for a phenotypic expression that is pretty outstanding. It's called the Apocalypto line. If you want, Nathan, I'll just tag you in it to make it easier for you to get to.
Oh, I won't see it.
You won't see it on Insta?
Nope.
Like if you pull it up on your computer, it doesn't show you if I tag you?
No, I'm not following that account. If you catch my drift.
Okay. But anyways, phenomenal line that looks great. They're super jagged and broke it up and crazy. But yeah, so when we're talking about ternates, let me speak a little bit more to their size. I know I got away from that from a little bit, but on the big end, you're going to get 13. On the small end, you're going to get around 8. And they'll breed at 4 years old. That's what we've been seeing for F1s. They'll breed at around 4 years old. And typically when they are breeding at that age, they're about 7.5 to 8.5 feet, which is about the length that you're going to get a Superdorf to breed when they're about 6 years old. And obviously we've seen extreme examples of Superdorfs breed at much smaller sizes. I think Andrew and Garrett have both produced clutches of super dwarfs that after they laid the eggs, they were 1,300 grams. Go up to that post that I made and you can see the other example, Tiny, if you click on the picture on the bottom right. Yeah, that's Tiny. That's the other female proven breeder that I have. She's going to be going to my ocelot this year.
Okay, what were you saying though?
Yeah, so you can get them to breed at a fairly young age without having to like pump them with a bunch of food. They tend to cycle at about 4 years old on the dot for a lot of these F1s that we're seeing. And typically that first clutch is yielding a clutch of anywhere between like 6 and 9 eggs. I don't think there's yet to be a first time breeder at 4 years old that produced at least a pure ternate clutch that I've seen that's produced more than 10 eggs. And I think that's why, part of their that whole supply demand ordeal is that even if someone produces 3 clutches of pure ternates in a single year, or let's say there's 5 in the country, and each of them are producing 10, eggs, and let's say it's 100% success rate, you're only putting out 50 ternates with 5 different clutches versus, even my Kalatoa, her first clutch with me was 28 eggs. And I think her smallest clutch with me was 24 eggs. So a lot of eggs.
18 and 23 or something like that for me.
Yeah. So they don't
a cross, but a high percentage cross.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't produce a lot of babies. So I think that's a good attribute for like they are sustainable in a market, right? That our market with the retics can be so up and down. You can't really overbreed ternates unless you have 6 of them yourself and you breed them all. Nathan, out of those 4 localities right there, which one do you like the most? Like just visually.
Well, let me pull it up so I can actually see. So the Mindanao.
She was gravid there.
What's this?
Wild caught Kalatoa.
Okay.
Oh, she's in shed. That's not fair. That's a Slayer.
I was going to say, I think that's the Slayer. I mean, just in terms of saturation, it's between the Slayer and the Ternate.
Yeah. She looks 10 times better too when she's not in shed, so that's cheating. But she's the only one that's in the small 27-gallon tote too. All the other ones are in the larger 40-gallon. She's also the youngest one. No, actually she's young. She's the same age as the Mindanao, I think. But so yeah, they're as far as like the market goes for them, it's hard to really overproduce them because despite how many have been made, there's I don't know, probably a couple dozen people that have them now, but I'm wondering why we haven't seen a lot of other clutches being produced by other people with them. And I think that's just because they more recently have been getting popular.
Yeah, probably. And then I don't think everyone's first goal, I don't think it's like a snake that everyone's seeing is super high in demand. So like, yeah, there is demand for them, but it's not like what everyone's searching out right now.
Yeah, I get asked all the time if I'm going to do any pure ternate clutches. This year I'm planning to do a pairing, and we'll see if she decides to throw another parther or not. But one thing that I will say is like, I don't know, if you want to go back into the Facebook group and find like a ternate that you really like, I want to hear from you, like what your thoughts are on like what morphs do you think would go really well with it?
Well, I mean, I'm partial to just a handful of morphs anyway, but This is probably my favorite example, but it's just probably picture quality more than anything.
Yeah, it's a great picture.
Through the saddles, the little bit of black that comes through just on the edges inside the saddles, I think is really cool on this example of ternate. And then again, it's just the saturation, the heavy blacks.
Yeah, I think anything with heavy blacks, I'm gonna be very keen to like a very dark T positive albino. I would like a purple or a caramel, or even, dude, I would love to see a mocha ternate. Yeah, someone please do that.
Yeah, that could be really cool. I know the platinum ternates looks really good. The marble ternates looked really good. I would love to see, and I think it may have been started or produced, is the anthrax ternates.
Yeah, there's heads on the ground, I believe.
Yeah.
Sunfire looks phenomenal as well with them.
Yeah, anything that's going to be an enhancing gene, I think that's going to go super well. So, Sunfire is going to work phenomenally. Platinum works well.
You know what I think would be really cool with it? And it kind of goes against what ternates are, but so I like phantoms, but like the phantoms that I like are like the very old school, like the nerd line stuff that they imported, that like really dark, and that the neck still had that crazy broken up pattern. That then went into more of the phantom pattern, and I feel like Ternate can get back to that dark, broken up, and like we see a lot of Super Door phantoms now, and they have that very clean, like just like empty, patternless, but like there's the stripes from the head that go down. Nerds phantoms back in the day didn't have that. It was a lot more just like basically that reticulated pattern was reduced but left with blotches, and it was super dark and saturated. And I think that a Ternate could go back into Phantom and bring some of that back.
I love my purple Phantom, but I'm not a huge fan of Phantom on its own. Even OGS, I'm really just a fan of what they ultimately can do.
Right. Speaking about their behavior a little bit more in detail, a lot of people I hear with like the Maluku regions get very worried about having an animal that's handleable. I mean, you saw it kind of firsthand at Phil's house with the food response on the Halmahera, right?
Yeah, he's excited to say the least.
Right.
Or excitable.
Right. And I think one thing that I want to just share as a disclaimer is that in my experience, and again, working with 6 different ternates and having a pair of Halmaheras, is that while they're young, especially the F1s, while they're young, they're going to be nippy. But you know, my Salayers were a little nippy. My you know, just about most of the localities I produce out of the egg, they can be nippy. But with consistent handling, and if you are not intentionally keeping them at a manageable size through like their meals, if you're feeding them and they're happy and they're full, not power feeding, don't get me confused here, then they've calmed down, and my ternate, my male ternate is probably one of my most handleable snake. If I have new people over, I'll take my male ternate out. My Halmaheras are the same way. They're some of my sweetest snakes in my collections. And so I kind of just wanted to speak on that, because a lot of people, you hear about like a lot of people that have gotten Halmaheras or ternates get them when they're older, and they don't work with them when they're young. Buy a baby, and that snake is not going to be any different from the other animals that you're working with if you feed it the way that they need to be fed. And I want to just emphasize that they do require larger meals, from my observation, than you would feed a Jampianus or even a Saputrii to keep them happy. They do, for some reason, just really do well with larger meals way less often. Are you going to keep going? This is great.
Anything else that you want to add in terms of behavior, range, color?
No, I'm trying to think of
breeding habits, breeding size. I mean, you only really have that one experience, but you heard stories, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, my other female as well that I have, Tiny, she's a proven breeder. And she bred at like 7.5, 8 feet. Her first clutch was 7 eggs. I think I talked about their breeding from what I know for the most part is from my observation and what I've heard as well from speaking to Rodney on his experiences is that they are very visual. Like you can see the follicles, you can see the ovulation very easily. You see the whole process. And he told me that ahead of time. And when I saw my female building follicles, I sent a picture and I was like, she looks gravid. Why is this? And he's like, no, she's ready. So yeah, and I will say their food response just gets a little extra during that time of the year. So when you think about a locality that their food response is already really freaking intense, that's just another added variable. You're just gonna, if you again, you work with them and you've worked with other retics, it's really not that like drastic of a difference. It's not like gonna scare you away, but yeah, the food response can be intense. They'll turn back at you in the enclosure when it's breeding season. Females will, if you're letting them in and you kind of just are in their space. But outside of like those few variables, super chill animals.
Okay, and I guess maybe my final question is, have you talked with anyone on the islands that has worked with, collected, bred, any island info that you've gotten over the years of keeping ternates?
Yeah, so I've talked to people from the island. That's part of like the different localities that I have. I've done it to people in the Philippines and Mindanao, and I will go out of my way to try to find people that are on the islands. You'll see people posting on the Retic Nation other areas that they are from they'll say wild caught ternate, and that's where they're at. And really the biggest question, I don't know anybody who's bred them. But the biggest question that I always ask people is about size, just trying to validate that these animals, and for I have man, I'll try to do a post-production and edit them in here if I'm able to find them. But yeah, there's a general consensus that they're smaller retics. And I even had one person, and this is the conversation I'm going to really try to find. I even had one person from the island call them super dwarfs. One, surprising that people in that side of the world even know the marketing term of super dwarf. I think that that's pretty cool, but I definitely wouldn't call them a super dwarf. But when you look at the size that Salayers get, you saw that big ass female that I have, and she's really not even that big. She's probably 14 foot at most and about 80 pounds. Well, that's a big snake, but she's not a giant. They're much smaller. Ternates are much smaller on average than that so far. But again, one thing that I do want to, like a disclaimer with size, is that no one has pushed them to their limit. I know from my experience, I'm not being reserved on feeding them, but I would warrant them the term dwarf. If we're going to use a marketing term, I know that dwarf is specific to Jampea and Salayer. That's where they originated from, right? Those two localities. But, I've said this before. I think that we can break retics into three sizes: small, medium, and large localities. And there's no doubt in my mind that ternates are looking like a medium locality.
Okay. Well, Lucas, anything else you want to add?
No, I want you, if you can, pull up my Instagram and show I think it'd be a really cool side-by-side example of what a Partho Superdwarf and a Partho Ternate look like. I posted a reel that I was holding both of them in my hand. I think the Partho Ternate was about 4 months old and the Partho Superdwarf was not even a month old yet. Hadn't even had its first meal.
How long ago did you post this? Because I don't remember seeing it, so you're going to have to help me here, Lucas.
I got you. Maybe about month ago. Like, I'll tag you in it real quick.
I found it.
Yeah, so this is a Partho Ternate from that female that was on that clutch, and then a Partho Pure Superdwarf from a undocumented female. But Yeah. I love the freaking rosettes on that tiny little super dwarf. But yeah, so you guys can definitely see the difference in color spectrum that you get from the super dwarfs to the ternates. You know, the ternates are obviously, I mean, I think visually speaking, just off the bat, are more beautiful animals, but you can't really beat the size package that you get with a super dwarf if you're looking for manageability.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, those are the two 2024 Partho babies this year, and hopefully the last. But who knows? Because that wild caught female is on day 33 right now.
A king must never lose his crown, Lucas.
Kings are meant to lose their crowns, actually.
Keep it for as long as possible, though.
Yeah.
What if Game of Thrones have taught me anything over the years?
Is that no one dies?
No. Keep it as long as you can.
Oh man. But yeah, rather than beating things over with a dead horse, I think that we can wrap this up in under an hour.
Beating it over with a dead horse?
Beating it up with a dead horse? I don't know what I said. I'm tired. Rather than beating it up with a...
We won't beat a dead horse anymore. We'll end the ternate species. Wow, now I'm getting lost. We'll end the ternate locality spotlight on that. Lucas, anything else to close us off? I know I want to thank just our Discord community, our Patreon family. We had our meeting last week. We had a great turnout, just a lot of fun talking everything reptiles, everything that's going on, shows that we're going to. So if you want to join with the link below or patreon.com/the Retic Lounge.
That link, I can never get it right, and I still can't. Okay.
You just have to point down.
Yeah, just down.
There you go.
Perfect. No, outside of that, just want to give a shout out to our sponsors. I know that we have the ads in there, but I do really want to say that I spoke to Stoney from AE Stoney, and he has noticed some people that are buying his hooks more than kind of like the average sales looks like. And so if you guys are purchasing those, or if you haven't already, please check out AE Stoney. They have absolutely phenomenal equipment that are just much different from your typical snake hook. Their feeding tongs are great. And then just want to give another huge shout out to Heartland Reptiles and those enclosures. We got to showcase and have a clutch in them, and you guys saw that there, but he's kind of doing something in the works that transitions a little bit over to the other podcasts on the network. He might be making some smaller cubed like enclosures that are for some smaller species. So I'm excited for him to showcase those, I think, at the upcoming show, or at least in Dallas. I think it's when he's going to have them. So I'll make sure.
Shoot your ideas off to Jordan. He was talking about a custom enclosure that he was, talking to someone at Schaumburg about. So give him your ideas. He can make it happen.
Yeah. Outside of that, don't really have anything. So Nate,
all right, guys, catch you on 104.
Catch you on the flippity flip.